Hey guys, nothing important here, and today we're doing an analysis of Rhulk vs Nezarec. We'll be keeping the video simple. We're going to analyze the two characters, we're going to analyze their hacks, stats, everything related with their stats, abilities, and then after that we're going to be going into who wins, equal stats, and non-equal stats. The usual, we don't want to have some elaborate intro, so we'll just go ahead and get started. So let's start with Rhulk. Rhulk's been on the channel before, so more of you might be familiar with him. Rhulk is something called a Lubranian. They live on a planet called Lubre. It's very far away from our star system, at a very different point of the universe. That's all we know. On Lubre, at one point, the Traveler came to their planet, blessed them, and caused the equivalent of what seems to be the Whirlwind. Again, we don't know about that, because the Shattered Suns lore book is only 10 pages, and it consists of Rhulk talking to the witness. So, this is all from Rhulk's personal recollection. Anyway, so on Lubre, there is two stars, one that is a brilliant blue, the other that is an eternal dark. To keep the sob story short, there are two halves of his society. His society lives in the wilderness because they were not the ones that kept the teachings of the light. They were in eternal danger. The regime could come and mess their crap up any day of the week. They had to hunt and kill and provide for the people. They were a clan's people that lived in the wilds. That's what Rhulk's clan was. The witness always believed that Rhulk was something of a monster or a sociopath, and the Shattered Sun story is part of Rhulk trying to accept the fact that he's a monster. Anyway, with Rhulk, regime members came by to his home. He grabbed a glaive that he named Relic Sword, named after his father. He killed them all. Sometime after that, he was rejected from his clan, kicked out. He wanted back. He knew that his father was abducted by the regime. He went to try to go and get him. His father, as it turns out, was a turncoat. Okay, not cash money. But at least he has his father back, and at least the regime allowed him to use his tenacity against their foes. So at least they were never dishonest to him, which he respected most. But then his father turncoated again back to his family. And then Rhulk went after them. They dunked him off a cliff. Okay, so now the newly renamed Relic's Bane was broken, and he was in sorrow at the fact that he was betrayed. Then he meets the witness, he becomes a disciple, he's granted power. His Relic's Bane is now renamed Lubre's Ruin. So he goes up and proceeds to Lobo them all. And then after he was done giving them the Lobo treatment, he then went and used something called the Upended, reversed the blue star, it annihilated the entire planet, and it died, shut off, blew up, cracked and exploded. So at the end of the day, Rhulk is essentially Lobo from DC, where they hurt his feelings, so he killed them all, now he's the last one. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to his powers. Let's go over his powers. He has fate manipulation, reality warping, the other stuff you hear about from the Demiurge. He can command you to die on the spot. He is acausal. He has a form of immortality in the form of his invulnerability. You can't hurt him. He can put up a giant shield, which I think gives him invulnerability also, but I'm not too sure. Feel free to contest that. He can recreate Lubre's Ruin from nothing and use it as a weapon. If you destroy it, he can recreate again. Doesn't matter. He has an experience in combat, presumably mastery of glaives and other forms of combat. He was rather noteworthy amongst his people, mostly for being a soldier and having a possibly psychotic mindset. We don't know. All we know is that he was called a monster and that he was extremely lethal in combat. And that was before he became a disciple, which actually was the reason he became one in the first place. So doing that actually allows the Lubranians to full-on outscale the Hive, physically. He has other noteworthy abilities, such as being able to fire blasts, as if they're a Ki Blast from Dragon Ball. He has other darkness-related abilities, like being able to summon Taken, due to the fact that he's a very strong character. Taken follow the will of people who are strong by instinct. It could be the Witness, could be Xivu Wrath. It doesn't really matter, but Rhulk is someone who can summon Taken. So let's go over Nezarec. Straight up, we know nothing about him whatsoever. The backstory he has is acolytes of his that are haunted by him, that, and some of them are even willingly in his favor. So not all of them are full-on tortured by him, presumably, but the only backstory we have for Nezarec is more or less people he haunted. So he's more or less something similar to an eldritch god from Cthulhu mythos. That's literally all we know about Nezarec. Other than that, his scaling comes from us reviving him, and then us not being able to hurt him at all, and then us being able to kill him taunting the main character while dead, him mastering the light while dead, presumably within the time frame of Root of Nightmares when we started empowering him specifically. He is a final god of pain, so he is a chaos archetype. He feeds off literal pain, terror, and chaos. We don't know if the Tormentors are clones of him or if they're a race of beings and he was a god of them. We don't know. We're not going to make that a debate because that's not for this video. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to his powers. Going over Nezarec's powers, he has similar powers to Rhulk. He also can manipulate fate. He also has reality warping, subjective reality, law of manipulation, invulnerability. If you shoot his roots on his armor, you can also stagger him a little bit. Although it noticeably stuns Rhulk more than Nezarec, so he seems to have more of a tolerance for it, if it's not a form of resistance. So, as a being of darkness, he also has a similar form of invulnerability to Rhulk / intangibility, presumably with the ship too. However, he also has differences. Nezarec is something called a pain god. We don't know if him being the final god of pain directly translates to him being the strongest or if he's the last of them. It's the same as with going with whether or not Tormentors are clones or people that worship him. All we know is that Nezarec was presumably a god thought amongst the Scions, due to the fact that he also has a psionic existence, and the fact that he mentioned the fact that the Scions adored him at one point. He can more or less feed on literal pain, terror, and anything within the archetype of chaos. You could rip your own eyeballs out, he will still haunt you. If you grab something that was associated with him, like an eyeball, he can haunt you. If you look at his face, you will always remember him. You cannot forget him. It's impossible. He'll always exist in your deepest slumber and your calmest moments and your most agonizing part of your life. He will always be there. Now, everything I just said was before he got the light. So, now going over the other half of his abilities, he has the same mastery over the light subclasses as Guardians do because he literally mastered it, presumably within the time frame of Root of Nightmares. We don't know if he started mastering it before that because we have no reason to assume so. Nezarec was mostly surprised and pleased whenever we responded to his messages, and then we started giving him power from the light, because in the first encounter it was all about feeding the light to Nezarec. So I'm guessing at that point is when he started getting a hold of it, because he started making statements about the light in relation to him right after that encounter. So he is dangerously intelligent. I would actually say he's more intelligent than Rhulk because of that. Another thing, the Void, we don't know if the Tormentors had access to the Void because Nezarec was alive, because they were clones of him, or whatever, but he can do the same thing Tormentors can, where he can grab you and drain you with the Void, and like fire Void blasts. What we do know is that because he has the light, he has a dangerous lethality with it, along with solar and arc. He has two forms of one-shotting attacks. One acts as a purifier blast, which is an overwhelming surge of light power, and the other is a darkness devouring blast, called the overwhelming surge of darkness. His powers, they're contradictive of each other, but the fact that he's able to wield them to a similar extent Guardians can, it means he has the concept harmony, in a very odd way of speaking. Truth be told, I'm trying to find the rest of the lore for Nezarec, but it doesn't seem like he has much. I've been searching for a while, so I'll probably make a video on Nezarec in the future. So, who wins? The answer, Nezarec. Oh gosh, some people might not know why. So, let's start with Nezarec versus Rhulk as a whole, using the fire team as the bar. Rhulk outscaled the fire team, then the main character made the glaive, so they were equal to or straight up stronger than Rhulk in base form. And then you go in a season of Haunted, where Callus dominates the entire season as a whole, with virtually no challenge, he big brains everyone. We push back the inevitable by a smidge, and then we go in Season of Plunder, where the debate of Aramis possibly scaling to the MC starts, and then we have that being confirmed in Season of the Seraph, where we had the whole spiel with Rasputin and Xivu Wrath, who are their own topic entirely. And then going into the DLC, we have Cabal that we don't one-shot, presumably some Tormentors that at first we don't one-shot, but then we eventually kill over time. And then we have Callus, who lost the nerf that he had, because he basically stated in the Duality Dungeon that he was dying. So take it or leave it, it's canon. And then after that, we have him also becoming a disciple on top of that, gaining more power. If you saw my tier list video, you'd see why Callus is pretty terrifying. Anyway, so the same Nezarec calls the Explicator, who presumably scales above Callus at this point, a useless sack of meat. He calls him a 3D being to him. So, we have multiple levels of upscaling, where you can make the case where the Explicator is outscaled by the fire team over time in mid-combat. But then we have Nezarec, who had to be straight up weakened. And the debate goes two ways with Nezarec. Either A, you go with the interpretation that the Gardener and the Winnower directly recognized what Nezarec was doing and wanted to reject him, which would allow him to possibly outscale Rasputin. Or B, we simply used the light and dark fluxes and, the field of light. We possibly used that to create a blast that could have weakened Nezarec. We don't know, but if one of those interpretations out of the two, which are the most to be accurate, if one of those were to happen, then he's going to be very different on the scaling end. Because it all comes from the fact that the Traveler tried to use a giant root to point toward the giant portal thing that the Witness made, presumably related to it in some way. So we don't know what the interpretation is with Nezarec in the environmental storytelling. So either A, Nezarec kills Rhulk, one-shots him beyond belief to an extent that it is even possible to compare the two, or B, he does it to an even worse extent, where he had to be recognized by gods themselves and had to be rejected by them. So, regardless of where you want to go, Nezarec speed blitzes, one taps, and wins no diff. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to the end of the video. So that's the video. If you guys have any questions, please link them below, because understand the versus battle was mostly a compare the two. It was not to be a massive lore video going over both characters, because I have video ideas for both, but they're going to happen in their own time. Anyway, my name is Nothing Important here, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.